The sky was bleeding into twilight when the first sound came. So faint it might have been nothing. A soft shuffle in the brush. Too heavy for wind. Too slow for deer. One of the women paused, her breath caught in her chest, and tilted her head. The child at her side felt it too, instinct curling cold along his spine. Something was watching. They weren't alone. The small band of 6 humans had stopped in a dry gully ringed with scrub and sharp stone. It wasn't a bad campsite. Low wind, decent shelter, a few lizards for roasting. But now, the shadows stretching from the stones looked longer than they should, darker than dusk could explain. The boy reached for his mother's hand. She took it, silently, and pressed a single finger to her lips. No words. None needed. Then another sound. Huff huff, low and hot like the breath of a furnace. The elder of the group, a man with half an ear and more scars than fingers, stiffened. His eyes darted toward the ridgeline. The brush was still, too still. He lifted a smoldering stick from the fire and held it high. The orange tip glowed weakly against the creeping dark. And that's when they saw it. 2 gleaming yellow eyes, locked on them from the shadows. In the prehistoric world, being hunted wasn't a twist ending. It was Tuesday. Before humans became the dominant predators, they were prey to some of the most terrifying creatures to ever walk, crawl, or stalk the earth. Saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, dire wolves, short-faced bears as big as cars, crocodiles the length of 3 canoes. And let's not even talk about the snakes. These weren't just rare encounters, they were everywhere. Watering holes, hunting grounds, sleeping sites. Even trees weren't always safe. You never knew what might be watching from the dark. The cave lion, for instance, was 25% bigger than today's African lions and just as mean. Could sprint faster than a deer and bite through a mammoth's thigh. Oh, and it hunted in groups. Nice. There were leopards known to snatch humans from trees at night. Giant raptors in some regions. And if you were near the water, crocs big enough to flip dugout canoes if you were lucky enough to have a canoe. But here's the thing, early humans survived. Not by strength, not by speed, but by cleverness. They became experts at reading the land, the air, and each other. They learned the signs of being stalked, the smell of disturbed grass, the faint clicking of claws on stone, the sudden silence of birds. They turned fear into a 6th sense. Back at the gully, the group doesn't run. That's the first rule. Never run unless you have to. Running says, I am prey. Walking says, I might fight back. The elder drops his bundle of wood but keeps the fire stick. He begins to move slowly backward, toward the group's biggest defense, the fire circle. They'd lit it with dry moss and sparks from flint, nurtured it through the afternoon, and fed it with dung patties and bark. It wasn't just for warmth. Fire was their shield, a wall of light and heat. Predators hated it, at least most did. The glowing eyes blink. Move. Closer. The group adjusts formation without a word. 2 adults at the front shielding the youngest. 1 woman digs in her pouch for a handful of dried goat dung. Great for smoke bombs. Another readies a pointed stick, charred at the end. It won't kill anything big, but it will hurt. And pain, as it turns out, is a very useful tool. A joke circulates in some modern anthropological circles. The first human weapon was the scream. Not far off. Prehistoric people used sound in all kinds of ways. Clicks, shrieks, whistles, even group chanting, to startle predators, confuse them, or bluff strength. Many animals, from lions to wolves, hesitate when uncertain. In the gully, the elder begins a low rumble in his throat. The sound is like thunder caught in a bottle. The others join in, different pitches, different patterns. It's not a song. It's a warning. The eyes blink again. Then another pair appears beside them, and another, 3, maybe 4, cave lions, hunting together, a nightmare wrapped in fur. The child begins to cry, not loud, but enough. One of the women hoists him onto her back, ties him tight with a hide wrap, and takes a step back. The men circle the fire, and then, in a flash, the lions move. But the humans are faster, not physically but strategically. One firebrand is hurled, flaming end first, into the dark. Another follows. The dung is tossed, erupting in sparks and choking smoke. And from 6 human throats comes a shriek like nothing the lions have heard. A chorus of rage, fear, and defiance. The sound of prey deciding not to be prey anymore. It works. The lions scatter, uncertain. Not wounded, not chased, but surprised. And that's enough for now. Later, once the fire is fed and the shadows have returned to their normal, less terrifying shapes, the elder sits with the children. His voice is quiet now. They don't always run, he says. Sometimes we do, but not tonight. Why didn't they fight? The boy asks. The elder taps his temple. Because they didn't understand us. They know teeth, claws, but not fire, not voice. not mind. He leans forward, whispering now. That's why we're still here. The fire crackles behind him. Tomorrow they'll move again. Hunt, gather, sleep in a new place. But tonight, under a sky of 1,000 watching stars, they are not prey. They are something else entirely. The sun had just begun to lift above the scrubland horizon, casting long shadows across the ground like spears made of light. But the humans were already awake. They always were, not because they were early risers by choice, no, because to sleep in too late was to miss the warnings. The broken twig that hadn't been snapped the night before, the faint scent of dung from a predator, the buzz of insects changing pitch when something large moved through the grass. Every moment in the wild was a test. And in this exam, failure didn't mean a bad grade. It meant something had already sunk its teeth into your spine. In the early days of human evolution, being paranoid wasn't a flaw, it was a survival skill. Early humans were smaller, slower, and far less toothy than the creatures they shared the land with. But they had one thing in abundance: awareness. They trained their senses like tools, sharpened, tuned, and always on. If you or I walked through the tall grass of prehistoric Africa, we might marvel at the views or stop to look at the bugs. But a hunter-gatherer from that era? They'd notice a single bent reed, a bird call suddenly cut short, the odd freshness of dung on a trail that had been empty yesterday. To them, the land was a symphony of signals, and they knew every instrument. In a narrow ravine dotted with baobab trees, a small group crept in silence. They weren't hunting, they were watching, which oddly enough was just as important. One of them, Nair, pressed her palm to the ground, her brow furrowed. Warm, she whispered. Heavy. The man next to her nodded. He crouched low and reached into his pouch, pulling out a soft handful of ash. With care, he let it fall from his fingers. The ash floated east, then curved sharply. A wind pattern, small but telling. It meant something large had moved west just minutes ago, shifting the air. Probably not a herd. Herds didn't sneak. More likely, a predator. Maybe a lion. Maybe something worse. Prehistoric humans developed a kind of situational awareness modern soldiers would envy. Their brains, lean from hunger and stress, had no space for distractions. Everything mattered, and nothing was ever ignored. They noticed changes in sound, the sudden quiet of insects, or the fluttering of birds taking off in a panic. They noted smells, the sour scent of big cat urine or the metallic tang of blood in the breeze. Even temperature shifts told stories, how shade fell differently at certain hours, or how dew clung longer to rocks that overhung spring paths. It was more than instinct. It was pattern recognition. If a certain cave had droppings by the mouth 3 mornings in a row, you didn't go near it. If antelope disappeared from a grazing patch without alarm calls, you checked for fresh claw marks. This wasn't superstition. It was science, the earliest form of data collection practiced barefoot and hungry. Night, however, was the real test. Humans are not nocturnal, but they became night watchers out of necessity. While some slept, others stayed up, trading shifts and responsibilities. They'd sit by the fire, listening, scanning, breathing with the rhythm of the dark. One such night, a man named Jor sat on a stone near the fire's edge. His eyes flicked constantly between the flame and the grass, not looking at anything, but scanning for what wasn't there. No owl call tonight. No frog croak from the distant marsh. Too quiet. He gently shook the shoulder of the woman beside him. She sat up at once, alert before even opening her eyes. That was the training. Check the southern side, Jor said. No sound from the waterhole. She grabbed her spear and vanished into the dark. Minutes later, a growl, then a scream, not from her but from something else. She returned dragging a branch freshly clawed. Leopard, she said casually. They moved camp the next morning. But perhaps the most underrated survival tool wasn't a sense, it was memory. Elders passed down danger signs like heirlooms. One cave was marked by soot in a spiral shape, meaning a hyena den. A rock had 3 red streaks scratched into its face, made long ago by someone who survived a lion ambush there. Oral storytelling wasn't entertainment. It was GPS for danger zones. Even children learned to track. One 10-year-old girl once followed a trail of blood and broken grass not because she was chasing prey, but because she was checking where a wounded predator might go to die. She found it, or rather, it found her. Only a shout from her father, and a flaming stick to the eye, saved her from the jaws of a wounded cave bear. She never forgot that feeling. Years later, she became the group's lead night scout. She was blind in one eye but sharp in every other sense. Some groups went even further, developing basic early warning systems. No, not bells or electric fences, but trip lines of dry reeds, bone rattles tied to low branches, little markers that would move if disturbed. One clan even trained their dogs, or at least the proto-dogs, to bark when they caught a scent on the wind. Not too loudly, just enough to wake the humans, not attract the beasts. And for the creatures they couldn't predict, there were backup plans. Caves with narrow entrances, escape ladders made of vines, exit routes practiced like fire drills. One family had a rule: always sleep with one foot touching the spear shaft. That way, if one person flinched, everyone else would feel it. It sounds extreme. It was extreme, but the alternative? Silence, followed by the wrong kind of breathing in the dark. By dawn, the group on the ravine had confirmed it. A saber-toothed had passed within 100 paces of their shelter. It hadn't attacked, too few of them, too much fire. But it had watched. One of the hunters scooped up the ash from the ground and rubbed it into his skin. Not as a ritual, just as camouflage. They were going to follow the predator now. Not to fight it. Not today, just to learn what it ate, where it drank, where it slept, because knowledge was power. And someday, when the odds were better, that knowledge would become action, and the predator would become prey. The smell hit first. Sharp, oily, and unmistakable. Smoke. Then came the glow, flickering low across the black walls of the cave like a living creature. A boy, not yet old enough to hunt but too curious to sit still, crept forward on bare feet. Around the bend, the elder crouched over a small fire, nudging a bundle of reeds into the flame with practiced ease. "Stay back," the old man muttered without looking up. "She bites if you rush her." The boy blinked. "She," the elder grinned. Fire. To modern minds, fire is background noise. Something summoned with a lighter, doused with a switch, forgotten in a stove. But to prehistoric humans, it was everything. A companion, a weapon, a shield, a god maybe, and most importantly, a turning point. No other species controlled fire quite like Homo sapiens. Sure, lightning could start a blaze. Lava might burn a forest. But only humans caught it, carried it, fed it, and bent it to their needs. That power changed the game, especially when it came to predators, because suddenly, the hunted had light in the dark. Suddenly, fangs and claws didn't look so terrifying behind a wall of flames and smoke. Suddenly, we fought back. It likely began with curiosity. A tree struck by lightning, burning in the distance. A smoldering bush after a volcanic hiss. A wounded deer cooked by a brush fire, its flesh strangely softer, richer. And then someone, maybe on a dare, maybe just hungry, touched that meat. Boom. Human barbecue night was born. But using fire wasn't enough. Mastery meant creating it, and prehistoric people did. They used flint and pyrite to strike sparks, bow drills to create friction, dry moss, birch bark, and even animal dung to catch flame. They kept embers alive during travel by carrying them inside hollowed bones or wrapped in ash-dampened moss like ancient thermos flasks. That glowing coal wasn't just fire, it was survival on the move. When predators loomed, and they often did, fire became both weapon and signal. A single torch could hold back a hyena pack. A burning ring around a sleeping camp discouraged even the boldest lion. Some groups even learned to manipulate smoke. They'd toss certain plants, spicy roots, pungent leaves, onto flames to create stink clouds that irritated sensitive animal noses. In one case, a clan in the highlands mixed dung and dried onions, yes, onions, into their smoke pits. Result? A natural lion repellent, nature's Febreze. Disgusting but effective. But fire wasn't just defense. It was a training tool. Take the fire-hardened spear, a real prehistoric innovation. By briefly charring the tip of a wooden spear in flame, hunters made it more durable and more lethal. Harder than bone, sharper than unsharpened stone. And unlike flint, it didn't snap when driven into thick hide. A group might gather around a fire the night before a hunt, each person sharpening their spear, then scorching the tip, scraping the blackened ash, repeating the cycle until it whistled through the air like a toothpick from hell. Add that to their growing toolkit: clubs, stone axes, throwing sticks, and humans became more than prey. They became predators with reach. Sometimes, fire was used indirectly in hunting. There are stories, supported by archaeological traces, of groups starting controlled burns in dry grasslands to flush animals out of hiding. Think of it as early crowd control. The smoke would send herds stampeding toward waiting hunters or into traps. Of course, this method had its risks. You had to know the wind, the slope of the land, and where you were going to stand when the mammoths came running. But used correctly, fire turned humans into stage managers of the savannah. Even small fires could be used tactically. Imagine tossing a burning bundle behind a predator mid-hunt, cutting off its escape or startling it into turning where you wanted. One clan developed a hunting trick where they'd light dry tufts of grass and drop them at intervals. The small, spreading flames would startle prey forward, right into an ambush. Pyro strategy. Before matches even existed. And then there was night. Before fire, the night belonged to creatures with sharper ears, brighter eyes, and bigger teeth. After fire, humans carved out safe space. They sang beside it, told stories, wound fibers into rope, scraped hides, fed their children warm broth, planned hunts, passed down knowledge. Some clans even developed fire language, a series of gestures, rhythms, and smoke signals used to communicate across distance at night. One quick pulse meant danger. A steady wave of flame meant safe camp. A spiral of sparks? Celebration. It wasn't Morse code, but it was close. And predators? They stayed back. Not always. Not forever. But fire gave humans one crucial advantage: time. Time to see. Time to prepare. Time to decide. And no predator, no matter how strong, could compete with that. Back in the cave, the boy watched as the fire flared higher. The elder gently poked it, adjusted a stone, tossed on a pinch of dried moss. "She likes that," he said. The boy hesitated, then reached out with a long stick. He tapped the edge of the flame, sending sparks dancing. "Will she protect us?" he asked. The elder smiled, not a wide smile, but one heavy with memory. "She will," he said, "but only if you feed her, only if you respect her. Fire's like the beasts we fight. If you tame her, she saves you. If you forget her." He left the sentence unfinished, tossing another stick into the glowing mouth. Behind them, the cave glowed with warmth. Outside, the darkness prowled, waiting, but it would have to wait longer. Tonight, the humans had fire, and that changed everything. They knew the mammoth was near before they saw it. The ground told them first, vibrations rolling through the soil like a whisper from beneath. Then came the smell, musky, wet, and faintly sour. Finally, the trail. Trees snapped like twigs, fresh dung steaming on the morning frost, and great crescents of crushed grass. It was time. The hunters gathered at the edge of the rise, crouched low. They wore no armor, no helmets, just furs and hardened spears. Each breath steamed from their mouths like smoke from battle horns. And below, lumbering through the mist, came the mountain with legs, 10 tons of muscle and memory. A creature that had crushed others. A living relic from the Ice Age. And today, it was the target. The idea of hunting something that could trample you into a fine paste seems ridiculous now. But to prehistoric people, it wasn't bravery. It was strategy. They didn't hunt large animals because it was hard. They hunted them because the reward was huge. One mammoth could feed an entire group for weeks. Bones became tools, tusks became carvings, hides became shelter, and even the fat could be stored in animal bladders for lanterns or food. But the trick wasn't strength. It was planning. And one of the most clever and lethal tools prehistoric people developed was the trap. It started simple: a hole, deep enough to catch, wide enough to hide, and covered with sticks, branches, and a dusting of leaves. Sometimes they sharpened the base with stakes. Other times, they just let gravity do the work. One wrong step and the animal would fall, twist a leg, and be surrounded before it could scream. Of course, digging a pit big enough for a giant elk or bison wasn't easy. Some took days to prepare. One group dug multiple connected pits, herding prey toward them like a funnel. They even lined the edges with sharp rocks to keep animals from climbing out. In one famous case from what is now Germany, researchers found a whole trap corridor, an ancient roadway lined with post holes and channels, clearly designed to funnel herds into danger. It was a meat gauntlet, and it worked. But the mammoth? That was different. You couldn't dig a pit deep enough. So humans used the land instead. Cliffs, ravines, boggy ground, anything that could slow, trap, or panic the beast into a fatal mistake. In the current hunt, the group had selected their arena days ago, a narrow pass between two rocky slopes, leading into a muddy basin. Once the mammoth entered, the way out would be difficult. The footing was bad, and worse, there would be humans waiting. They'd even set distractions. Mammoth dung from another herd to mask their scent. Smoke pots buried near the trail to spook the animal and push it further in. It wasn't a fight, it was a performance. And the mammoth was the star. The signal came. A low whistle, like wind passing through a hollow bone. Hunters emerged from behind the slope, fanning out. Two younger scouts began hooting and throwing rocks from the opposite side, pushing the mammoth forward. Trumpeted, angry, confused, and charged down the narrowing path. Perfect. But then problem. A second shape moved in the mist. Smaller. Another mammoth. A calf. The hunters froze. Plans paused, because prehistoric people surprisingly had rules, not out of sentiment, but because wounding a mother near her calf was suicide. She would fight harder. And the calf? It was too young. The meat too lean. The risk? Not worth it. The elder waved a hand. Abort. In one fluid motion, the group changed course. They let the mammoths pass. That wasn't failure. That was adaptation. Because the truth is, prehistoric people didn't just set traps, they built systems. Take the drive lines, for example. Long rows of stones or stakes used to guide animals toward a kill zone. Think of it as a prehistoric airport runway, but with more blood at the end. Or the cooperative hunts. Multiple groups working in sync, some acting as noisemakers, others lying in wait with weapons. They even used decoys. There's a theory that in some regions, humans wore the hides of animals, yes, literally dressed as prey, to lure or mislead. Risky, sure. But if it brought a herd closer to a cliff edge, worth it. Sometimes they'd chase animals toward bogs, soft, wet ground where the hooved beasts would sink. Once stuck, it was easy pickings, and on rare occasions they used fire, starting controlled burns to drive terrified animals toward pit traps or narrow valleys. No brute force, just brilliance. One strange, lesser-known technique involved mimicking predators. Some humans would imitate the calls of wolves or big cats, not to scare animals away, but to herd them together. Prey animals often clump for protection when predators are near. That clumping made them easier to trap or target. One young hunter had a perfect hyena cackle. He'd crawl into the brush and let it loose just before a drive. The sound caused chaos and confusion. Worked every time, until the day a real hyena answered. He ran fast that day, faster than most. Back at the basin, the clan sat around the fire that night, quiet but not disappointed. They hadn't taken a mammoth, but they'd learned something. The calf was old enough to travel, but not yet to fight. That meant the herd would stay in the area for a few more days. Maybe even circle back. They had time to revise, time to redig the traps, to move the smoke pots, to prepare sharper spears, and when the herd returned, they'd be ready, because hunting wasn't just survival. It was architecture, psychology, patience, and precision. And prehistoric humans? They were masters of it all. Rain had fallen the night before, just enough to darken the soil and slick the stones, not enough to ease the thirst in the air. Morning light revealed prints in the mud. Some human, some not. The human ones showed toes gripping the earth, as if trying to move quietly. The other prints, clawed, white, heavy. They led toward the sleeping camp, and stopped just 10 paces from the fire pit. Whatever had come in the night had stood there, watching. The idea that humans once ruled the earth from the very beginning is a comforting myth. The truth? We climbed our way to the top, bruised and bitten. For millennia, the biggest threat to our survival wasn't disease or starvation. It was teeth, apex predators. Massive, fast, and efficient. Once stalked the same trails, drank from the same streams, and sniffed the same night air as the ancestors of everyone alive today. And the danger didn't just come from one species, came from dozens. Some walked on 4 legs, some slithered, some flew. All of them could kill. Consider the short-faced bear, Arctidus simus. Standing up to 12 feet tall, it could run faster than a racehorse and weighed as much as a small car. It didn't just compete for meat, it would chase you off your kill. Then there was the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon fatalis, whose dagger-like teeth weren't just for show. One well-placed bite and a human was done. And these cats often hunted in open grasslands, the exact terrain where early humans liked to forage. In colder regions, meet the dire wolf, heavier, stronger-jawed cousins to modern wolves. These were pack hunters. Their strategy was patience and numbers. And in river deltas or swamps, the threat wasn't on land. It was in the water. Massive crocodiles like Crocodylus anthropophagus. Yes, that literally means man-eating crocodile. Lurked near riverbanks, waiting for a foot to dip too close. One quick lunge, gone. But the greatest threat might not have been the biggest. The leopard, solitary, stealthy, and shockingly strong, may have been one of humanity's earliest killers. His bite was powerful enough to crush skulls. Its ambush tactics were nearly silent. And, unlike larger predators, it could climb trees to drop down on sleeping humans. Archaeologists have found hominin bones with puncture marks, perfect fits for big cat fangs. Some were juveniles. Not all made it to fire-making age. So how did early humans survive in a world that wanted them dead? By adapting fear into intelligence. They started sleeping in groups, backs to each other. Not just for warmth, but so no direction went unwatched. They made noise, not always to communicate, but to announce, we are not alone. We are not easy. That's why prehistoric camps are full of rattles, clappers, and rhythm sticks. Some even mimicked the sounds of other predators. Imagine a clan of humans walking through high grass, and one of them starts growling like a saber-tooth. Badly, maybe, but just enough to confuse a real one nearby. It wasn't courage. It was psychological warfare. In the dark, with sticks. Eventually, defense became offense. They learned that weapons, even simple ones, leveled the playing field. A long stick with a fire-hardened point could pierce a lion's flank. A flint-tipped spear thrown in formation? Deadlier than any claw. Over time, they invented the otlotl, a throwing stick that launched spears farther and faster than any arm alone. It turned distance into defense. And the first kill before it gets too close strategy was born. One ancient account tells of a boy, who used his otlotl to strike a giant hyena from the back of a tree branch while others distracted it below. He became the youngest scout in the group the next day, not because he was brave, because he survived. One strange, lesser-known tactic? Eye spots. Some humans painted their backs with crude eye shapes. 2 black dots ringed in white or red. The idea was simple. Trick predators into thinking you're watching them even when you're walking away. Does it work? Well, some modern jungle tribes still use the technique, and predators do hesitate when they think they've been seen. And in the ancient world, hesitation could mean the difference between dinner and death. Over time, a strange thing happened. Predators began to avoid human groups. Not always, not everywhere, but they started recognizing firelight, human stink, and our unearthly singing as a sign to stay clear. We became a dangerous prey item. Too much trouble, too many screams, too many spears, too many friends who showed up late to the party with torches and rocks. Eventually, we were no longer prey. We were something else. Back at the edge of the fire pit, the muddy paw prints had dried by midday. The elder stared at them in silence. He took a piece of charcoal from the ashes and sketched the shape into the stone wall. 4 round pads, long claw marks. A warning, a memory, a lesson. Not every footprint meant death. But every footprint meant something. The children watched. They didn't ask questions. They were learning the way humans always have, by staring at danger long enough to see the patterns, by turning fear into knowledge. And that knowledge traveled faster than any claw.